Hey Rishikesh.
Hey guys,
Hello.
and hey Annie, it's again a weekend, and it's again, I'm talking to somebody, who is one of my favorites, right? Favorite not because of, he's a human being, but because, he has written some great stuff, right? Which is actually useful for so many people around us, and especially for people who are not exposed to this word, which is known as, growth hacking, and, how can you scale your startup? How can you attain product market fit and all that, which goes on inside the minds of, new entrepreneurs who just enter into the space. You must be seeing a number of startups coming up, raising a lot of funds, making a lot of money. And I know many of the B school guys, the graduates, they all want to make good startups, but this can be a good starting point, or maybe a thing which you can keep throughout your journey, to take an inspiration from, to take some insights from. I welcome you, Annie. And so I will start it with one thing. So I was actually going through your profile, and what I found out is that you have done your BTech in biotechnology, but
I
then you
did.
landed up in Tesco. So how was
Right.
it like?
I first of all, thank you for having me, Rishikesh. I mean, thank you for reaching out. It's always nice to talk to people like you, and the fact that you've read this book and you've drawn insights and drawn value. I think it's huge validation for me. So thank you for that. And in terms of my undergrad, dude, so like I think in grade 12, a lot of my really good friends did biotech. And I remember very clearly there was like, man, biotech is going to be like this new revolution, right? There's the IT revolution, and there was like this biotech revolution. So my decision of doing biotech, to be honest, was more based on maybe FOMO or like what others in some sense wanted to do. So I actually had a seat in drama and mechanical, and I shifted to biotech. But somehow I think by year 2 or year 3, I realized that like my deep skills or something that I'm good at maybe not necessarily intersects with biotech. And I don't think research was something that excited me as much. A lot of my friends went on to go do their PhDs, and I was like, man, I don't see myself doing PhDs. So that was the reason I guess I did my undergrad there. And then standard, you sit for college placements. And I remember getting to Accenture and Tesco. And finally, they were like, Tesco seems more interesting. I think I got paid a little more in Tesco at that point. I think my starting salary at Tesco was 3.6 lakhs a year. And then at Accenture was 3.2. So I was like, man, I'll join Tesco. But then, yeah, you join Tesco, you start doing testing, you learn coding, and you're like, dude, this is not for me. So so I don't think it was as exciting as I thought it would be. But I was lucky enough that one of my friends started a company in the startup space, which is very basketball focused. And I grew up playing basketball. And I was like, man, I'm just going to jump in. Like it after being in Tesco for I think 8.5 months, I was like, I think it's a good time for me to switch. Honestly, I was 22 years old. I didn't have to. There was nothing to really worry about from a place of like what could go wrong. Like best case scenario, obviously the startup does really well. Worst case scenario is like, I'll find another job. And that's what happened. That's kind of led into my startup journey in some sense.
Yeah, and that was crossover. I think it is
Yeah.
crossover intelligence. It is right. Yeah,
It was called Crossover Intelligence, and then became crossover.com.
crossover.com. So do you remember any interesting story out of your stint over there? Because you did a lot of stuff inside this company, right? You did product, you did operations, but you were hired as a business analyst.
Yeah. So when I was hired, I was a second member in India, and one of my friends, his name was Vasu Kulkarni, went to Penn for his undergrad. He played junior varsity basketball there, and the problem that they were trying to solve at that point was how do we help kind of high school coaches and college coaches break down their video film after
Yes.
a game, given that they would spend a lot of time in some sense indexing. So the challenge was, let's say you record a game in a nice, and that time, remember 2007, 2008, they would like we didn't have such developed phones at that point, right? So you had like stands and the camera was like kind of recording this content. And there would be a person dedicated who would like watch every clip and then cut saying, oh, this was the shot made. This was the miss, right? This was the player. And they would burn it in CDs and then like watch it 2 days later. So the whole goal was, can we get rid of CDs? Can we figure a way out where indexing instead of taking or like recording these data points, instead of recording 3 or 4, can we do real complexities? I mean, really complex capturing of data by using, let's say, a tool plus like someone actually watching it and tagging or indexing these events. So I was kind of my role there initially was primarily to bridge the gap between the marketing team in the US and the kind of the tech team in the US and the the tech team in India, because they didn't know much about basketball.
Yeah.
So it started with that, and then with I think like with any startup, it's a highly evolving role. So initially we were 4 people working out of like a small office, and then slowly you had to build an indexing team. So my role there was to, right from paying the bills to doing sometimes jhadu on the side to filling coffee to obviously like be doing HR related stuff from a recruiting standpoint to business analyst. So I think that was really exciting. And I think one of my learnings there was, man, if someone can experience, like there are different phases in which you can experience a startup, right? So if you can do this when you've picked up baseline skills in a large company that kind of say you want to transition into a startup. And I think the beauty of that is like, you know what you're good at and you can bring those skills into a startup. Whereas like if you just jump into a startup straight out of college, you'll be like, my God, there's so much out there that I didn't know. And you pick up these skills very quickly. Yeah. So I think both have their merits. And I think it boils down to a choice of when you want to join. So yeah, it was fun. By the time I quit after almost 2.5 years because I want to do what Basu was doing in the US. So we raised like a Series A, but then I switched over to doing my master's actually.
Right. And you mentioned inside your post as well, like, your goalposts keep on, shifting as you actually aged at the age of 16, then at the age of 22. Why did you decide to do a master's then?
I looked at it as a vehicle in some sense to break into maybe more customer facing stuff in the US. And I think things have changed in a 10, 12-year horizon in India today. Like actually you're seeing incremental innovation happen here. You're seeing some fascinating startups that are creating products here that's for a global standard. But I think at that point in time, I was like, man, I felt like the action was in the US. It felt like innovation was in the US. It felt like, you could go join a company and actually feel really close to a customer. Like what can happen in India is you can feel kind of disconnected from the mission. You can feel slightly disconnected from the customer because you're serving a market in the US, right? So I said, what's a good way to do it? And I think master's is a good way to kind of get a foot in the door, go abroad and study. And I think this course that's where the whole transition into doing something which is more analytics and business came into play.
That's great. And that was the time when a number of Indian students, started looking out as well, because, till that time it was mostly like, we have to do your education from India. And it was, but it was in the scope of the elite people, to actually go outside and do an MBA or maybe an MS from outside. But now what we see is that there has been an enormous amount of transition. I see my own younger brother never talking about IIMs or IITs. He's always talking about, going outside and, doing something from there. So right. What do you think? Like, is it the education system in India, not able, to actually deliver to these aspirational, younger generation coming in, or is it something else?
I think global experience is beautiful, dude. I mean, especially, I think a lot of people. So there are 2 types of learning, right? There's the academic learning, which you will get in an institute. And I think obviously IITs and IIMs offer that at a very high level. Like there's no doubt about it. And I think universities in the US also offer it in a pretty strong way, but they offer it from a place of maybe like more application collaborative way, right? So I think that's definitely interesting. But I think the advantage of going abroad is the amount of learning that you can get from talking to people that are not from your country kind of helps you find your own like sweet spot of who you are as an individual, right? I think you can have a lot of these weird biases when you're young, and like I remember actually going to the US for the first time and feeling really small, dude. Small as an individual. My act, I never thought of my skin color. Suddenly start thinking of the fact that I'm brown. I didn't think about my accent as much, and then you go there, it gets pronounced. So I think the first 6 months can be radically different for you, right? I remember entering New York for the first time, and very clearly remember got down the aircraft, took a cab, got into this temporary housing that we had for a week from the grad school folks from Columbia. And I remember getting into the train and I was like, dude, nobody makes eye contact. This is so weird. Why isn't anyone looking at each other? In India, like everybody just looks at each other when you're walking across each other. Right?
Yeah.
So I thought that. So it took me, and I remember getting down 59th Street at Columbus in Manhattan, and then I looked up and there were the Trump Towers, and I kid you not, it was so intimidating. You don't see buildings that big in India, and I'm from Bangalore. 6 floors is like your standard, right? Like it's not something which is massive. So I think it took me a good 6 months. And I think just, it's like, I think you're a product of the system. When, let's say you're around a set of people who are high performing, suddenly you're seeing people around you working out, really working hard, like dressing really well. Suddenly you're like, man, I think I need to step up my game. So I think that experience, I think is quite fascinating. Like diversity in thought, nobody can beat that, dude. Like when I say diversity in thought, like you meet such unconventional people. You meet people saying, oh, I was in the army and then now started transition into the startup space. Oh, I traveled for 4 years, nomadic. I was in Kenya and then I was in India, then I came back to the US. So suddenly you feel like, man, being unconventional is cool. You should be unconventional. And a lot of interesting, if it depends a lot on the city as well, Rishi. Like if you're in the right city, you can get a lot of exposure. So I think those pieces hard to replace in a quality education when you're talking about going abroad. But I think standard of education actually could be a lot more competitive in India. That's for sure.
And this is what people say. Colleges are not places where you actually learn stuff from your professors, but the kind of a circle in which you actually live in that makes a lot of impact in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And now I will come to your book. So, the title of the book says Scale Smart and how to get your first 100 customers. Why not 10,000 customers? Maybe like why 1,000?
It's actually first 1,000 customers, not 100 customers or 10,000. I feel like if you reached your first 1,000, you figured it out. And obviously, it was just a number that seemed to resonate with me. Actually, the book went through iterations in terms of the name as well. I thought initially, should I call it the Startup Handbook? Should we call it the Growth Book? And then I did this exercise with 3 of my friends. We actually did a naming exercise for the book. So we kind of like, I broke down the concepts of the book. This is what we want to do. And then it kind of like, we did like this nice post-it kind of brainstorming session. And somehow, I remember one of my friends, Anushka, she kind of recommended like we should do Scale Smart. Because it's like this alliteration, like it sticks. It's easier for people to kind of remember. But to your point, Rishi, in terms of the number itself, I think most B2C customers, most of B2B SaaS, if they hit the first 1,000 where the most iterative process happens, then it's more about just putting fuel to the fire in some sense and scaling. So hence that number.
And so just after your Tesco instant, you have actually worked as a growth hacker for Shutterstock and growth mentors for other organizations as well. And this growth hacking as a profile has actually gained a lot of traction, especially in the past years. What does a growth hacker do, and what is this profile all about? What is being expected from you?
I think the concept of the word, first of all, I think growth hacking is a buzzword. It's like AI today. Like how many people are actually doing AI in ML? I think they're just placing a set of rules, and I mean it is in the direction which is supposed to head. But I think growth hacking, at least when I was there in the US between 2009 and 2013, was really picking up as a concept. And I think during that time, I think Sean Ellis kind of came up with this concept of growth hacking. And I think the reason they came up with that terminology is because you need these new age skills to be a growth marketer in a small company or in a large company. Like you're not your traditional, hey, I'm going to do like distribution on television or radio. But today, the skill of growth hacking requires a little more, or the skill of the marketer is more around experimentation. It's around like, do you understand a little bit of tech? Do you understand a little bit of design? Do you understand a little bit of psychology? And obviously, do you understand performance marketing and analytics in general? So I think conceptually, it's just about the role of a marketer that's changed in a company today. because most of the products today have some kind of tech nuance to it. The understanding needs to be also more around the skills piece. So I think the interesting place, I think we lost you there, Rishi. I think we'll wait for Rishi to come back and then we'll start again.
I'm back. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I think as a skill set, I think today if anyone says, hey, they're a growth hacker, they are someone who maybe understands things like how do you get customers, how do you retain customers, how do you refer new customers. So there's like a funnel associated with it that people usually talk about. But it has been overdone. I think the word growth hacking has been overdone for a bit. So today, do you just have more cross-functional skills as a marketer? I think that's becoming more relevant than anything else.
Got it. So maybe, what we can say is that, growth hacking is some domain which actually involves a lot of, cross-domain working and requires a lot of stakeholder management across different teams.
Yeah, I think most roles, when you start interfacing across different functions, will involve some form of communication, stakeholder management, for sure. But it's become also less about, hey, earlier there'd be 5 people or 6 people doing it. Now it's about like smaller teams doing it. But then tools have started replacing some of these automations and behaviors and things like that.
Got it. And so you talk about a number of growth strategies like that is being used by the company. But there's one thing which is there is that, so how do you decide on a particular growth strategy? Is it all based on experimentation, or do we have a framework to decide that?
Good question. So I usually try to offer 2-3 frameworks, and I think most kind of frameworks kind of fall into this. One is so it depends on the stage of the company, Rishi. So let's say there's a company that's already kind of, let's say, doing $10,000 a month. And they're like, hey, I want to move to $100,000 a month, right? So you kind of look at what's working currently, what's not working, look at all the kind of channels that they've tried, what are the experiments that they run per channel, and then from there, say if something is working, can you double down on that, right? Sorry. So that's one. And but I think another good way to look at it is look at what your competitors are doing and see what kind of channels have they used to kind of scale their business. I think a smart way to look at it is if you could reverse engineer, let's say you're a fintech company and you're looking to, let's say, scale. Let's say you're trying to build something like a Zerodha, let's say hypothetically, right? Or like a Grow, right? So if you could look at Grow's strategy between 2017 to 2019 by reverse engineering, by literally filtering Google's results during those days, seeing what they did, looking how the site looked using webarchive.org and how the site looked in 2017, you get a good sense of what kind of strategies they were using back in the day. And then even today, you could look at tools like SimilarWeb, you can look at tools like SEMrush, Ahrefs, that all kind of tell you like, hey, this is what your competition is doing right now. And then from there, you can reverse engineer and figure out what they need to do. But I think it's lesser about, I think sometimes it's lesser about channels. I think it's more about, like, channels is like your veins and your messaging is like the blood that goes through your veins, right? So like how you position it actually makes a big difference. So I think even getting a little creative around that is actually quite important. So yeah, I mean, my framework is more, what are their goals? Asking them what kind of keywords that they are associated with it, who are their competitors, what's their positioning, and then from there do a bunch of research, and then based on my experience also come up with, okay, you know what, this is something that we should do moving forward.
Yeah, and for all the tools that you like to know, the book has got a mention of that. In the last 2 pages, if you see, you'll find Annie has actually mentioned all the tools which can be used by the entrepreneurs. Now, one thing which has always been you talked about a graph which is given by somebody, I don't remember the name, in the first few pages, which actually talks about how the startup life is like, and then you reach product market fit, and then you scale it up. So, I've got a question, like, what is this product market fit all about? How do you define it?
I think when I was younger, I would have defined product market fit as it's the product that fits the need of a market. But that in simplicity. But I think it's important to define what product market fit isn't. And I think Mark Andreessen has this from A16Z. So he's written some interesting books as well. But he basically says, I'm rephrasing or paraphrasing, but he talks about like, that when you're trying your marketing efforts and you're getting a lot of churn, right? You're trying your level best, but you're not even growing 10% month on month, right? You feel like your energy is dipping in a company. You feel like your employees are trying to push against a wall, but the results are not showing. That's the qualitative way of knowing that, listen, you haven't achieved product market fit. But I think if you had to quantitatively see, like, you're talking about like, at least you have a good set of people, even if it's 10 people who are not your family and friends going, dude, oh my God, Rishi, this product's amazing. Oh my God, I use it regularly. So like product market fit could mean like your churn, which is people dropping off month on month, is less than 10%, right? Your daily active users are quite high. Right? When I say quite high, like if you're boasting anything about 15, 20% daily active, that's pretty good. Right, your lifetime value, let's say, is more than 6 months. Right, you not having to do much, you're growing organically. Right, so I think all these things are maybe fundamentally product market fit, and I think an entrepreneur knows. I think when you start your business, there's all this excitement of like building product or building the service and all that, but fundamentally when you have not achieved product market fit. And I think what I mean by that is like, it's important not to fool yourself, right? Like you can get into these whole vanity metrics like, man, I have 100,000 users. I have appeared on these places, right? We raised around. I think those are all important, interesting metrics. But I think it's not going to matter what you put up on LinkedIn. It's going to matter when you're not online and what you're telling yourself and what the company is doing to know whether you achieve product market fit. And it's just kind of unfortunate today that the system is a little chaotic, man. Like I know people that are raising around on ideas who haven't achieved product market fit, but exceptional backing. Exceptional credibility, right? That they have. Companies that are not profitable but are still obviously growing in daily active users in a big way. And when you look at, sorry, I think I lost you there a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
So
but when you look at startups today, right? Yeah. I would urge everybody to not build a startup to raise money. Just talking through experience. You don't want to build a startup for something which is non-revenue focused, because and this is something that I wrote about also recently, there may be 50,000 startups out there, but maybe a handful, like 50 of them actually reach $1 billion valuations. And like you reaching $1 billion valuation still doesn't mean that you have $1 billion in the bank. It just means like you have companies that are $1 billion valuations but still have 3-month runway. What does that mean? Right? Like, so you have to be you want to build a business that you think will trip into profitability at some point in time. So till then, you're playing the debt equity game, right? So yeah, I think I digressed a little bit, but I think I think it's important that most companies kind of build for product market fit first.
Absolutely. And on this, I've got a question, and I'm got to take your opinion. It may not be an answer in true sense. Is people talk about marketing ethics, and how do you think startups these days are actually following those ethics?
Are they? Wait, hang on. Sorry. Yeah. So fundamentally as marketers, our goal is to break systems, right? We are essentially trying to help a business get more customers, and if it means more customers, we'll try to do everything in the legal boundaries to make sure we get more customers, right? I think most companies, actually, I do feel most companies, when it comes to marketing, are in the spectrum of being ethical, right? It just makes sense. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so many companies like thriving, right? And customers are not stupid. I think that's important to remember. Also, customers are actually quite smart. So you can't fool somebody for a long period of time. They'll get to know. And with social media, everything just becomes very amplified and known quickly. So, but I'll give you an example, right? Like Amazon, if I put up my products up on Amazon, and I know that, and one of the things with Amazon to actually sell a lot is reviews, right? So a lot of companies early on would buy reviews, and Amazon didn't have to have a verified purchase. So you don't have to necessarily have bought a product to leave a review. Then, so there was this huge surge at one point in time where companies ended up having 5,000 reviews, 6,000 reviews. And then Amazon tried to come down heavily on making sure that you can't do that, and then clamp down, right? But like, who was that? Marketers essentially did that, right? And then finally, now marketers are trying to find new ways to get reviews, right? So I can tell you, like, as marketers, obviously, like most people fall in the spectrum, and I think you wouldn't be doing a good job of thriving as a company, but I think there are some people that kind of err on the side of on the gray as well.
Yeah. But one of the things which is so important, when you're deciding a growth strategy, is to define your user persona, called will be called 101 of growth marketing. So how do you define user persona, and what are all the factors that has to be taken into consideration?
I think, first of all, user personas, you feel like this is like, let's say, a semi-fictional version of your actual customer, right? So when you're just starting off, your user persona is a hypothesis. Like, you don't know till you actually got your first customer. So you believe that, my customer is, let's say, Rishikesh, would be male 27 to 29. He's male, lives in Bangalore, urban, spends 3,000 to 5,000 rupees on fitness, let's say. So if I'm trying to build a fitness product, right? But it's only when I start marketing and pushing this out, you will start seeing your people that are actually engaging with your product and are really excited. They become your personas, right? So, and it's important to kind of dissect your personas. Like every product, you'll have different types of users, right? Like with Facebook, you have the 18 to 22-year-old, you have the 22 to, let's say, 28-year-old, you have that 45 to 60-year-old. So like you have different slices or slivers of these people. So, and the more you kind of dissect and say these are kind of people, the more your messaging can kind of evolve and be more targeted over people. So I think it's extremely important that you build those out and use that as like a starting point on when you're trying to build your product in some sense. Because every customer has a problem, and then every problem is a solution, right? But every solution doesn't necessarily has to map back to the problem, and then not every problem has to map back to the customer. And I think as entrepreneurs, we can be very solution first. So yeah, I think it's persona should be your starting point for sure.
Absolutely. And now so I keep on talking to a number of people, especially the guys who are kind of background from B school and engineering. They actually do want to do a lot of startups, but then the point is that coming out with a good team, right, and having a great team is so very important to do to take your startup far ahead. But then, many times what it happens is that you have got one person, you have got two person, but then you don't have a tech person with you, you don't have a marketing guy with you, or something of that sort. What will be your advice to these guys, who are actually looking out for a good team member? What are all the things that they should look for, and which are all the platforms that can actually help them get a good team member, or maybe a good co-founder?
I think that might be one of the biggest decisions you'll have to make as a founder. I think forming your ideas might evolve, but your team will fundamentally be the foundation. And I mean, I've gotten into building Masterlife from scratch. I think we started with
Your network goes off.
sorry,
Any like yeah. Now it's fine.
my network goes off. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna maybe switch to my hotspot if that's easier. Should I continue speaking or
Yeah,
should I
it's
switch?
good now.
I'm gonna switch. Okay, hang
Yeah,
on.
sure.
If easier. Yeah. Yeah. So you can hear me right now, no?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes. It went off again. Hello.
Hey,
Yeah.
Rishi,
Now
so
you're
sorry,
audible.
man.
Yes. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
my bad. Yeah, so yeah, I think finding a co-founder might be one of the most difficult kind of decisions, and finding that person's quite challenging. I think I tried finding one when I was trying to start Masterlife, and someone with complementing skill sets. I think it's extremely important if you can find a co-founder early on by actually digging into your own network first and having as many conversations as possible. I think people think that, oh, I have this amazing idea, I'm going to go ahead with it. I think most founders, like if you look at Swiggy's founders, they started with, let's say, on the B2B delivery side, and then a year and a half they pivoted into a food delivery on the B2C side. I know this one, InMobi, started as M Coach. They were a team of 4. They pivoted into InMobi, and it was the pivots will mostly happen, whether it's pivot on a strategic idea, and I think your team is fundamentally going to make a difference. So if you can go in even with another co-founder with some complementing skill set, I think that is huge. And finding it is difficult, and I think that's a decision that you want to make for yourself, which is, do you do it, do you start working on the idea, and then as you keep evolving you try to find a co-founder, or is it like both of you go in together and then figure out what is the idea that you want to go after, right? And even from a funding capability, Rishi, like most VCs will fund you well if you have at least 2 co-founders. 2 to 4 is a sweet spot. If you don't have that, VCs are a little like, man, it's too much pressure for a single co-founder. They don't want to handle it. What if you decide to quit? Like, what do you do then, right? So that's one thing to think about, and it's tough, dude. It's emotionally quite taxing.
That's true. That's true. Emotionally quite taxing, that line actually, and this is valid for most of the entrepreneurs around. People think that, it's so easy, people are raising a lot of funds, people are earning a lot of money, but then if you go on and see their lives, you'll actually find out that it's a lot tougher on the other side of the, on the other side actually. It's very easy to look on LinkedIn and just, keep on seeing their marketing activities as such.
Right. Actually, you know what? I define there are different kinds of stress that everybody goes through, dude. There is obviously physical stress when you get hurt. There's emotional stress with things that'll happen, like which is let's say relationship stress. But then survival stress. I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, tough, man. When you fundamentally believe that you are responsible for the company's survival and your survival and employee survival, most entrepreneurs age very quickly. That I can tell you. Yeah.
Right. I've heard a number of entrepreneurs, telling that, I just worry about one thing, like how will I pay my employees the next month?
Right.
That's the topmost priority that I have.
Right. It is not
And that's
easy.
what changes once you become an entrepreneur. You start thinking about other people.
Yeah. And no work is beneath you, dude. If you have to pay the bills, if you have to move laptops in an office, you will do it. You will become a lot more humble. You'll get used to delayed gratification. I think it teaches you how to play the long-term game and the short-term game. The skills that you will pick up. I think everybody, no matter what, should try to start something on their own, even if they fail in 2 years, because the learnings that you will get 10x, dude, hands down, 10x. You can't beat that. You can't. I don't know anything else in a 2-year period. Even an MBA doesn't come close to what you can learn in a 2-year period with a startup. Which is if you learned about raising money, running, paying employees, how to make revenue, how to register your company, how to hire, you will get the basics of that. Man, if you fail, also your next startup is going to be pretty solid. You'll definitely increase the likelihood of success.
Exactly. Now, one of the things, so I've been doing sales, for most of my life, especially after my MBA, and I felt one thing, and I want to have your opinion on that. Is that sales as a skill, is very much underrated, especially inside the B schools. I don't know why. People talk a lot about marketing, but people don't want to talk about sales. What is your opinion on that? Sales as a skill set and sales training in schools, colleges, specifically schools and colleges.
I think sales. Okay, so I mean, the highest paid people in the US are salespeople, in large companies. Obviously, you have the founders and all that who get paid well, but I mean, and they have equity. But if you look at most B2B SaaS companies, if you look at most B2B players, sales. See, the top heads get paid well across the board. Whether you're head of product, whether you're head of sales, head of people, or head of engineering, you all get paid well. So I think sales is a very natural skill for most people in the US or in capitalistic countries, actually, even in the UK and Australia and things like that. We are somehow being trained to get jobs surprisingly on the tech side, like bhaiya, become a doctor or become an engineer, and lesser about sales per se. But I think if you wanted to ever start something on your own, I think sales is a huge skill, right? Convincing people to say, hey, give me your money and I can deliver, I think is huge. And I think sales has got to do a lot with trust. If you can establish trust quickly, then people will buy. And marketing in a lot of ways is establishing trust, but it's less in person, right? It's more one-to-many. But I think you need to have either you need to be strong in sales or strong in finance. My take on if you're starting something on it, you need to know how numbers work, where you can create value, or you can be like, man, I can get customers. Yeah.
And now, Anis, you have actually, written in your book that you actually, took the interview of 25 plus CXOs, and I have got the list with me as well. So it's actually 28, the names that you have actually mentioned, including one of them who is an associate professor at IIM Bangalore. So won't call him maybe a CXO, but it's like 27 CXOs along with the professor out there. But yes, professors are the best people. They have actually trained those CXOs. So yeah, no credit taken away from them. So did you interview them, just for the purpose of this book, or you were like, you were traveling all across the world? You were in Africa, you were in places, where people may not go in their life. It was a part of your life, like, you actually interviewed all of them, or was it just for the book's sake?
Well, it was actually surprising. The book has taken a pivot. So initially it started off with, let's write a book, which is more around, I have an idea, how do you use product market fit, but like, let's kind of break down each of their stories. Like how did Bharat Matrimony scale to idea to public? And breaking down by channel, broken down by channel, broken down by metrics and all that. But somehow it made sense.
Sorry to interrupt. Bharat Matrimony, I remember, that community marriage which you actually talked about.
Yeah. Dude, they are in the Guinness Book of World Records for a lot of reasons. Actually, Limca Book of World Records, not Guinness Book of World Records. But the kind of push that he's made, Murugavel, my God, like they wanted to have like a marriage day or something, which is like Bharat Matrimony came up with. The largest speed dating event Bharat Matrimony has done. It's ridiculous, right? So honestly, I didn't expect to interview so many of them. But it started off with Ankur Variku. He was grateful enough to say, I will give you my time. And he spoke at a conference, and I spoke at the same conference, and that's how I know him. And the only hack in all of this was do a little research about the speaker or the person that you want to get information from. And you tell them, like, once I spoke to Ankur, I looked at his list and said, hey, Ankur, can you introduce us to these two people? And then when I spoke to those two people, I'm like, hey, can you introduce me to those two people? And then it became a network effect in some sense. And I also wanted to break it down based on channels. So after a period of time, when you start looking at like, oh, Chumbak has 500,000 community members, then we were like, okay, can we get introduced to, the marketing at Chumbak or the founders at Chumbak, right? So I think that's how it kind of evolved. The goal is never to say 30 or this is the kind of people. And actually, there were a couple of people that I didn't interview. I carved out the story by just doing all the research around it that's available and then reverse engineering a lot of the work that they've done. I showed it to them and said, listen, I'm thinking of putting you in the book. This is a chapter I've written about you. What do you think? And they said, yeah, I love it. Here, take my approval, right? So I think that was also interesting.
Yeah. And then, we would like to talk about a little bit about Masterlife. What is it all about, and what all the special courses that you offer?
Masterlife is actually been inspired by my own just journey between, I guess, 18 to 33. I felt like people don't end up, at least in India, they don't end up teaching you just fundamental life skills while you're growing up. And those life skills could be right from public speaking to how to improve your mental health. And I said, okay, because India is the most depressed country in the world. It's just stats, man. I mean, it's sad. But, and I think it's one of the reasons obviously there's lots of reasons, right? There's a lot of diversity, there's poverty involved. We don't celebrate individualism as much. So I think all of those can be factors, but I said happiness is also a skill and can we teach these skills.
Yeah.
So Masterlife is a platform where you can come and pick up skills for the mind today, at least has evolved into that. And the areas that we focus on are across 8 areas: business, contribution, fun, finance, relationships, health, personal growth, and spirituality. And we have courses right from how do you improve your mental health to how do you have a financial abundance mindset to how do you improve in storytelling and how do you get a sales mindset, right? So everything is very mindset focused, but we're trying to collaborate with some really good experts in each of the space, and we try to create content exclusively for Masterlife. So you can come do courses, you can do group classes, you can hire a coach, things like that.
It's quite an interesting stuff, Eddie, because in India usually we ignore all these subjects, but later on what we realize is that these are the things which are so much important.
Yeah.
You may not know algebra, you may not know calculus, but if you don't know these things, you cannot survive longer, maybe.
Yeah, actually, surprisingly, these skills start becoming very relevant as you move up the ladder, at work at least, right? Somebody can be really good technically, but once you actually, let's say, start becoming a leader, they'll be like, man, you need to learn to become more emotionally intelligent. You need to learn how to develop presence. You need to improve your leadership qualities, right? So those skills somehow which you could have refined early on, and it's just the nature of how we're set up, right? Everything is focused towards jobs. So people are going to pick up those skills first.
Yeah. That's true, and that's what create a lot of difference. And then talking about the happiness part, it's very true. It itself is a skill. If I just close my eyes right now and tell that I'm talking to someone, right, who has written such a great book, it gives me a lot of happiness, right? So happiness is not something which needs to be derived from somewhere else. We just have to close our eyes and have to think that how lucky we are, how grateful we are. And this is itself indeed a skill. Because yesterday I was talking to one guy, I will not take the name. He's he has done so much in his professional life, and one line which he actually told me, which actually shocked me, was that, Kirishikesh, now I feel that we can die anytime. and that reflects the state of mind in which that person is right now. Won't say that he's actually responsible for that, but maybe there are a number of things that we should know, like how to inspire our own self, how to keep ourselves motivated, how to keep ourselves happy. And guys, you should go on this master life thing, because I have actually explored it. It's a great thing that Annie is actually doing, and I keep on following his post, and I keep on seeing that he keeps on posting it at regular intervals without any expectation of likes and comments and all. Right, there are some of the posts which gets a lot of likes, there are some of the posts which may be getting six likes, but the intention is not that. This is what I actually
Right.
found out from stalking your profile. What are
Oh,
your
thank
views
you,
on
man.
that?
I like to write, dude. I genuinely like to write, and I sometimes, I mean, I speak to my wife about it. It's like I
Yeah.
want to write more, and I actually want to be a lot more. I want to be bolder in my writing. I actually want to call out bullshit when a lot of people don't. We're not confrontational. I'm not confrontational per se, but I like to speak the truth, or at least call out what is out there if we can. And I'm constantly formulating some random ideas in my head. So as soon as I think of something, I either put it up on LinkedIn, or I sit on a Saturday like this and I'll just schedule a bunch of posts. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, man, I mean, who cares about, I mean, likes is cool, but it's not a driving factor, to be honest.
Yeah, so I've got curious to super curious after actually stalking your profile, Annie.
Yeah, nice.
Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you for
taking
that.
out your time, especially on this weekend. And I hope, I I truly trust that you and your family are doing pretty well. And please stay, homebound. Grow your beard, more, and
Same thing goes for you, dude. I hope your family is okay and your extended family is okay. I mean, we know a lot of people that have been affected by COVID right now, so it can be disheartening. And I mean, sir, you can feel kind of purposeless and languished, and you can be like, how can you help? And what you're doing, you'll be like, how does this even matter? Right? Like, people are actually losing lives right now. So I think that's a little tricky, but uh, yeah, I think it's important for us to figure a way out to help and stay positive if we can.
yeah, and peace of mind is what ultimately which matters.
Yeah, for sure.
Taken away from your post, Annie.
I had a feeling. I had a feeling you're referring to that post. Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
Sure,
and
man.
thanks for your
No
time.
worry. Thank you.